To all of my horror lovers out there, this year has brought us a mixed bag of treats. From horror comedies to revival and closure of some of our favorite horror franchises to more Stephen King adaptations, another mid movie by Oz Perkins, and a couple of banger horror movies that stand alone. In this video, we're going to cover the best and the worst of the horror movies that 2025 has brought us. So without further ado, let's get it. All right, Spooky Gang, so talking about 2025's horror movies. And as I go down the list of the horror movies that were released this year, I'm going to do it by release date and essentially tell you whether it's one of the best, one of the worst, or if it's probably just some mid. The first movie that we're talking about for 2025 released horror movies is the movie Presence. This movie is about a family who moves into this home and they're convinced that they are not alone. The movie is essentially shot from the perspective of the apparition or the ghost that's in the home that they're moving into. And if we're being completely honest, I think this movie was a really creative idea for a horror movie. I genuinely dig the concept, but in terms of the execution, I just didn't necessarily feel like it was executed all that well. And then honestly, some of the characters weren't overly compelling, so it wasn't really anything that you would want to stick around for. I mean, yeah, you have people like Lucy Liu, and you know, that's an accredited actor, but still, like, sometimes no matter how good of an actor you are, if your script and the way the movie is going to be shot is going to be a certain type of way, there's only so much impact that you can have. So yeah, this movie overall is mid at very best, but I'm probably going to say it is one of the worst of the year. The next movie on the list is Companion. Companion is about a weekend getaway with friends at a remote cabin that turns into chaos, and it's revealed that one of the guests is not what they seem to be. Earlier on in the year, this was one of my favorite horror movies for the year. I think that this was also another really interesting concept for a horror movie. Around this period of time earlier in the year, this was essentially just like, it was starting to seem like it was about to be a year of the horror comedy, and you're going to see that by some of the other movies that I list right after this. But yeah, it just seemed like it was just a bunch of horror comedies, but this was the best one of the ones that were considered like a horror comedy. Sophie Thatcher is great. Jack Quaid is great in this. It's honestly just pretty solid all the way through. It paces pretty well. And yeah, like I said, probably one of my favorites for the year still. But since there were a couple of other ones that came after this that were better, it's probably not top 2 or anything like that, but it for sure is going to be labeled as one of the best of the year. The next movie is Heart Eyes, which is another horror comedy, and this movie is about 2 co-workers have to survive the Heart Eyes killer on Valentine's Day. That's essentially what this movie is about. I think this one was pretty decent, had some pretty solid comedic moments, nothing crazy. I don't think it was quite as good as Companion was, but I think that it was still pretty enjoyable. I didn't feel like, you know, I wasted my time watching this movie. So I believe this movie was on, if I'm not mistaken, this movie was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there, but a pretty solid movie overall. Some decent acting, so nothing necessarily to write home about. It wouldn't necessarily be one of the worst, and it's definitely not one of the best of the year. This movie is definitely one of those ones that I would consider mid. Not bad, not good, just a decent watch if you happen to have time on a Saturday or something like that. The next movie is The Monkey, and this is also another horror comedy. This movie is about when twin brothers Bill and Hal find their dad's old toy monkey, and then a series of gruesome deaths start after that. I'll say storyline with this movie, it's really not that good, and I've gone on the record before that I've just really come down to terms, especially when I get to another movie that was released by Oz Perkins later in the year. I just think I'm just not a fan of the way that he directs his movies. It's just not for me. I don't want to, you know, just go on this tirade and say that he's trash or anything like that. It's just, I just don't get it. I don't resonate with it. I think that this movie is probably the funniest out of pretty much all of the horror comedies that have come out this year. So yeah, there were some genuinely funny scenes in this movie with the horror aspect of it. There were some pretty decent deaths that the monkey caused, but just, we don't really care for Bill and Hal and what they're going through. So this movie would fall in mid at best. The next movie is The Woman in the Yard, and it is a dog pile. A mysterious woman who repeatedly appears in the front yard and delivering chilling and unsettling messages and warnings. I can't lie to y'all, this movie is just not good. I don't know how else to put it. Writing to directing to characters to just, nothing is really interesting about this movie. I don't enjoy it at all. I'll probably never watch it again. Definitely one of the worst of the year for sure, and not much else to say. The next movie is Death of a Unicorn. The movie stars Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd, and it's about a father and daughter who accidentally hit and kill a unicorn. while en route to a weekend retreat where the father's billionaire boss is looking to exploit the powers of the unicorn. In terms of uniqueness, this movie is probably the most unique out of any of the horror movies from this year, but uniqueness doesn't necessarily always mean a good movie. I will say, because this movie was so different, there were little charming elements to it with the unicorn and things like that, but just overall as a movie, it's really not a good movie. Can you get a couple of kikis, a little bit of enjoyable moments like I mentioned? Sure. But to think that this movie by any stretch is gonna be considered one of the best of the year, it just, off of premise alone, it can't. And then let alone the way it was executed, it just, no. Definitely probably one of the worst, but it's one of the worst that you may find some enjoyment out of. The next movie is the movie Sinners. Now, this movie was absolutely polarizing. It's about twin brothers who are trying to leave their troubled life behind them, and they start their life over again in their hometown, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. I can't really name anybody who doesn't like this movie. Now, how high on your list in terms of, is it the best of the year or is it top 5? It's gonna fall somewhere in that range no matter what for pretty much anybody's opinion. Yeah, this movie is just really good overall. When we're talking about performances from people, I think that this is easily top 2 in terms of the performances from the actors, top 2 in direction. This movie just has a lot of things going for it, and then when you consider the cultural significance of the movie, that just adds that many more points to it. The only thing that I will say about this movie is the third act is the weakest of the entire movie, but that's not necessarily saying that it's a bad third act. It's just the weakest in comparison to the first 2 acts. Anybody who hasn't seen this movie will enjoy it to some degree, no matter what. The next movie is Clown in a Cornfield. With this movie, the title kind of says it all about pretty much what you're in for. I thought that this was a pretty solid, fun, little popcorn movie. Once again, nothing that you're gonna take overly serious. It has a little bit of enjoyable elements. It's also a horror comedy, so you get that. It's just a little decent middle of the road movie. That's the best way I can put it. The next movie is Final Destination Bloodlines. Just one of those movies that wanted to resurrect the franchise and extend it, and I think that they did a very solid job. I really enjoy this movie. This movie does a lot of things well, a lot of the things that you love about the Final Destination franchise in terms of the creative deaths and your premonition scenes. This is one of the best premonition scenes. And once again, talking about characters, pretty enjoyable characters as well. Even though, a lot of them are lined up to be knocked off, but you enjoy them all the way up until the point that they are knocked off. I would say that this movie will fall into the category of one of the best of the year, for sure. The next movie is Fear Street Prom Queen. And with this movie is basically the it girls that are competing for prom queen at Shadyside High. This movie sucks, straight up. I mean, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it with you guys. It's definitely a departure from the first 3 Fear Street movies. So once again, another movie that's trying to extend some level of a franchise, and it fell on its face. This movie is just not good. Even though Fear Street 1666, I don't think is that good, but still, 78 and 1994 are very solid. This movie's not it, fam. The next movie is the movie Bring Her Back. What's cool about this movie, just in terms of the year 2025, I think that this is the only movie that I'll watch this year that I can purely say is a horror movie. Every other movie that came out this year, for the most part, is some level of a blended genre. Whether it's one of those elevated horror movies, then there's movies that are the horror comedies of the world, then there's the ones that are like the suspense thriller type horror movies and all that good stuff. Like, everything is basically a blended genre, but this is the only one that was like, okay, this movie is just pure dread. It's the best way I could put it. The movie is about a brother and sister who uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother. So seeing some of the things that they go through and some of the imagery and how you see the demon in the little boy and things of that nature, there's a lot going for this movie. It's not the most entertaining or captivating movie of the year. I mean, it's not, do I just see myself rewatching this movie? Also, no. A technical aspect, it is a good movie pretty much all around. So this definitely is one of those movies that I would say will fall in the category of one of the best of the year. The next movie is Dangerous Animals. This movie is about when a surfer is abducted by a shark-obsessed serial killer, and she must find a way to escape before he does his ritualistic feedings to them. This movie was pretty interesting, honestly. It was a nice little take on your traditional shark movie. Decent acting, nice direction, some pretty solid shots. Once again, not a movie that appears to be just a crazy high budget. Not really a whole lot to complain about. Would I necessarily say it's one of the best of the year? If it happens to fall in that category, it would be at the bottom of best of the year, or it's at the top of mid, if that makes sense. But it's not a bad movie by any stretch. And if you happen to like movies that involve sharks and things of that nature, then I would say that I would recommend this movie just to give it a shot and see what it's talking about. The next movie is Megan 2.0. Megan is back and she's resurrected to defeat Amelia, who is a military-grade weapon who has some of the same underlying technology as Megan. Not that the original Megan was just anything spectacular, but this movie definitely went in the wrong direction. Megan didn't even need a sequel to begin with, so the fact that they just like pushed this movie out and it really did nothing for the horror genre, we didn't need it. We didn't need it, and I didn't need to see it either. So yeah, this movie would fall under one of the worst of the year for sure. The next movie is the movie Together. This movie is about years into their relationship, Tim and Millie find themselves at a crossroads, and with their tensions flaring, they encounter a force that plans to bring them together forever. If you are big into body horror movies, then this is a very good entry into the body horror subgenre of horror. I think we get some really good performances. We actually care for these characters, and I've talked about it numerous times how all that stuff matters. If you're going to be making characters go through something, and if we're going to see them on screen for a long time, then they need to be compelling. You need to actually have people intrigued to see what is going on with them and what's happening and all this good stuff. And this movie does a solid job being able to establish that. And from the body horror aspect, some really nice effects. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel rushed or anything like that. Just pretty good movie all around. And I would say that this movie will fall into the category of one of the best of the year for sure. The next movie is the movie Weapons. This movie is also another one of those polarizing movies, but for a different reason than a movie like Sinners. This movie is about when all but one child vanishes from the same class on the same night at the same time. A community is questioning who or what is responsible for their disappearance. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all up front, this is my #1 horror movie of the year. I love everything about this movie. Coming off of Zach Cregger's first movie, Barbarian, absolutely loving that movie. Okay, I was pretty interested to see how he would do with this movie, and he struck gold again. It's the best I could put it. I mean, I really enjoy this movie. I love the character of Miss Gandy. I like Josh Brolin's character. I like Gladys as a character. I love the way this movie is shot, how it's not shot in chronological order, so you're just sort of bouncing around, getting little pieces in different perspectives of pretty much the same events that were happening, just from the lens of somebody else. I think that was really nice. That was really a nice asset to the movie, and it's just a fun movie all around. And I know a lot of people have a problem with the ending, but I think the ending was just like a cherry on top of just an excellent movie. And your boy Tech is putting his stamp on this movie. If you have not seen Weapons, I 100% recommend watching this movie, and it is the best of the year. The next movie is The Conjuring: Last Rites. This is the finale and conclusion to the Conjuring franchise, and I think that they did a very good job overall. This is the best of the Michael Chavez directed films in this franchise. I think he did a pretty solid job here. I think from a continuity aspect, it was really nice seeing how some of those recurring characters, even characters that are like side characters in some of the previous films, how they show in this movie. Regardless of how much sense it makes that they would even be there, it's just nice to see them. Still great performances from Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. Overall, I think that this was a nice little love letter to the franchise, and in a pretty good way to end it. And to me, would be one of the best horror movies of the year. The next movie is The Long Walk. And with this movie, it is about a group of teenage boys who compete for this annual contest known as the Long Walk, where they must walk at a consistent pace of at least 3 miles an hour or else they get executed. This movie kind of caught me by surprise. It's also another Stephen King adaptation, but I wasn't even aware that Stephen King even had a story on this Long Walk, because I'm not just like the biggest Stephen King guy. It's not like I'm just reading all of his novels and things of that nature. I think the Long Walk was really solid. It does feel kind of horror adjacent as opposed to like true horror, but the horror in this movie is the fact that, hey, if you stop, you get shot. So, I mean, that's really what it's getting down to at the end of the day. Once again, when we're talking about characters and them being able to capture the attention and the love of the audiences, I think that this movie probably did it the best out of all of the movies, just in terms of likable characters, feeling for them and rooting for certain characters to succeed or maybe even some to fail, you know, whatever it is. This movie was just so well-rounded. It's a really straightforward movie, really simple, slow pace, slow burn, but it nails every single aspect to me, and for sure it would be one of the best of the year. The next movie is the movie Him. This movie is about a young athlete who descends into a world of terror when he's invited to train with a legendary champion. This movie, also on the scale of uniqueness, would be on the higher end in terms of this being a sports horror movie. Then obviously the themes that come along with it, the pressure to be great and to sacrifice your body to put on a show for not only yourself but fans and the owners, coaches, things of that nature, anybody who's depending on you. So some nice things there, but just the overall execution of this movie just kind of flat, man. I can't even lie to you. There are some nice little scenes, but nothing in totality that I'm ever gonna tell somebody to be like, oh yeah, you need to watch that movie Him. It's just not that movie. It just isn't. This movie would fall in the top end of the worst of the year or the bottom of mid, but it's definitely not one of the best movies of the year. The next movie is Black Phone 2, and very similar to the first one. I'm just not a fan. I see what Scott Derrickson is trying to do, but the problem is it feels like a cheaper, lesser version of Sinister. That's really what it feels like. I think it's something about the Grabber, nothing really about Ethan Hawke himself, but the Grabber as a character is just not that interesting to me. Like the more he's on screen, the less I enjoy the movie. This entire movie with this whole lake thing and the phone and going back in time, but you're not really back in time, you're kind of in a trance. Like it's just too much going on, and it's not that good. Even with them trying to throw in the mother character and, you know, try to have us feel something for her. So I would say that this movie is one of the worst of the year. It's same thing with Oz Perkins movies. It's just not for me. And speaking of Oz Perkins, comes the movie Keeper. And this movie's about a romantic anniversary trip to a secluded cabin turns sinister when a dark presence reveals itself. I just recently watched this movie. It's not good, bro. Hey, I don't know what to tell y'all, man. Oz Perkins and his movies just are not doing it for me, man. I see what he's trying to do from a artistic standpoint, but it's just the execution is just so bad. I don't know. I don't like the presence, the entity, the apparition, whatever you want to call it. I don't like anything about it. It looks ridiculous, if we're being honest. That thing that we see at the end of the movie is even more ridiculous. I don't know. This movie just is not. It's not it. So yeah, this movie is gonna fall under one of the worst of the year, and that's exactly where it's gonna stay. But that is all I have, Spooky Gang. So these are all of the main horror movies that I watched in 2025. Yeah, I know there were probably a couple of more that came out, but like some of those Robert Eggers movies like Frankenstein and stuff like that, but I'm not. After seeing Nosferatu, I'm good. I'm not watching that. So yeah, there were probably a couple of movies that I did miss, like Ugly Stepsister and so on and so forth, but these were just the main ones that I watched, and this is pretty much how I felt about them. So if I could speak in totality, I think that 2025 overall it's been all right. I don't think it's been a bad year. I mean, it hasn't particularly just been a good year. It's just been okay. You know, we had 2 standout movies in Sinners and Weapons, and then we had some pretty good ones, some pretty mid, and a good amount of pretty bad. So and I think a part of the problem too is 2024 was so good that it just makes 2025 look that much worse. So I'm hopeful that 2026 brings us new surprises, new very solid horror movies, less of the horror comedies. I think we had enough of that in 2025. If we can get something, make it more along the lines of serious horror, and I'm trying to scare the mess out of you, as opposed to, you know, here's a little scare here and there, but here, I'm gonna make you laugh over here. Like, it's just too much. It's just too much. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So 2025 has been pretty solid. Y'all comment down below, what are some of your favorite movies from the year 2025? And if you think that in totality, it was a good year for horror. So yeah, y'all comment that down below. Spooky Gang, y'all already know how we rocking. The content is gonna keep coming. I appreciate y'all as always. Y'all always showing love. So y'all know how we do. Until next time, Spooky Gang, y'all stay blessed and y'all stay spooky.